Hello there, Chesca Brewer here for the news weather. Today it's partly cloudy with a strong gush of wind expected today. 18 to 23 degrees in the city and a top of 25 in east of Victoria. As Australia enters autumn, asthma becomes more apparent within all Australian communities, but particularly with the large populations of Indigenous Australians. Let's look at these communities and why they're higher risk of asthma triggers. Aboriginal Australians in rural Victoria are recommended to take care of themselves, as asthma attacks will be easier to trigger at this time around. It was actually found that pollens and allergens are more prevalent in areas populated heavily by Aboriginal Australians compared to non-Indigenous Australians. With this in mind, I would like to urge our Aboriginal brothers and sisters to be more aware of what can trigger their asthma. There are two types of triggers: avoidable and unavoidable triggers. Triggers such as exercise and laughter are not to be avoided, as they have proven to have long-lasting benefits to a person's health. Physical exertion due to work demands, such as working in the farm or working manual labor, is another trigger that cannot be avoided and should be managed. Many rural Aboriginal communities require support from occupations that involve heavy exertion, so it is recommended that asthma is identified as early as possible to reduce rates of hospitalization for exercise and labor-triggered asthma. Fast-acting inhaled medications should be carried at all times for those with identified asthma. Although short-term asthma of these triggers can lead to constriction of bronchioles and decreased air transfer, in the long term they can improve health function. Other triggers that are unavoidable, such as changes in temperature and breathing of cool air, are not shown to be higher in Aboriginal communities. Avoidable triggers, on the other hand, are able to obviously be avoided. These include cigarette smoking, occupational triggers such as the use of paint spray, air pollution, indoors and outdoors, animal hair, and viral infections. Let's look more closely at some of these. Overcrowding is a major issue in rural Aboriginal communities, with many people living under the same roof and often sleeping multiple people in the same room. Poor ventilation, which includes inadequate aeration of smoke, smog, and indoor wood fire for cooking inside houses, is statistically more significant within Aboriginal communities. Due to overcrowding in houses, house dust mites, molds, dust triggers are much harder to avoid, therefore increasing the risk of provoking asthma attacks. Household pets also increase the risk in these houses, along with a higher chance of the transmission of contagious diseases, including viral infections, known to increase the severity, duration, and frequency of asthma episodes. Another trigger that is more relevant in the Aboriginal community is agriculturally related triggers. For example, smoke emitted from bushfires, vegetation reduction fires, chemical irritants, and farm dust pose a high risk for developing asthma or triggering asthma, as farmers are directly interacting with such irritants. Farm animals also pose a problem because of overcrowding. Therefore, the amount of farm dust and fur exposure increases significantly. Although these factors are quite unavoidable for the Aboriginal farmers, as farming is one of the main sources of their livelihood, measures should be taken to prevent any asthma attacks where possible and quickly manage any exacerbations of asthma. Last, but definitely not the least, let's look at the most notable risk factor associated with asthma attacks: smoking. Australian Aboriginals have higher rates of smoking in their communities. Approximately 45% of Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders aged 15 years and over smoke on a daily basis. This directly places them at a higher risk of developing asthma and triggering attacks. Additionally, this increases the rates of secondhand smoke, inhalation, and other members of the community, including children. Overcrowding and poor ventilation in houses compounds this problem. Moreover, survey data has suggested that approximately half of Aboriginal women smoke at some point during their pregnancy, and this highly increases the risk of a child developing asthma throughout their lifespan. Looking at these risk factors together, we see a trend that shows a correlation between environmental factors and the increased rates of asthma we see in Aboriginal communities. This is adding to the burden of healthcare services in these already struggling communities. So measures to tackle the burden of disease of asthma in these areas should be looking to reduce exposure to avoidable triggers and to encourage education in areas where triggers are unavoidable. Thanks for listening, and now back to Jenny in the studio.